Hey guys, hope you're doing well. I just wanted to take a few minutes and go over your last exam. Let me just pull that up and we'll go through the questions one by one. All right, so again, your first exam, a quick review. The first question, your course materials identified five main topics that IO psychologists investigate. So we're talking about selection, training, organizational development, performance appraisal, and quality of work life. So please identify two of these concepts and describe how they are interrelated. So the key here was really how do the two concepts that you identified and described influence one another? So you really could have picked any of the five. Just for purposes here, I will pick performance appraisal and training. Performance appraisal, again, in terms of what that is, performance appraisal, the thing that kind of pops up in my mind is a 360-degree performance appraisal. So a very nice concept, very nice tool in which we use to engage, identify, and see where our employees are in terms of being successful and efficient within their job. So a performance appraisal, a 360 performance appraisal, if you guys remember, gets feedback from many different areas. So we may get feedback from colleagues. We may get feedback from that particular person themselves. We may get feedback from multiple managers. Again, we put all that information together to get a nice look in theory of how that particular person's doing. Training, pretty self-explanatory, so that we are doing some form of continuing education in terms of making sure that particular person is being efficient and successful on their job. How are those two things related? Well, in order to identify your training needs, you need to know where that particular person's strengths and their weaknesses are. Where do we find that? Within the performance appraisal. So based upon that performance appraisal, that is then going to influence, all right, your training needs in terms of what you're going to encourage and advocate for that particular employee to be involved in. All right. Number two, there are a variety of ways in which a job analysis can be done. Many experts tend to concentrate on identifying task-oriented and worker-oriented tasks. So what do those mean? Task-oriented, just like it sounds. What is it that particular person needs to do in terms of their tasks? Okay. Worker-oriented has more to do with the behavior of that particular individual. So what do these mean in terms of, let's say, working with a K through 12 teacher? Well, that particular person in terms of task-oriented needs to be able to make exams, put together exams. They need to be able to develop lesson plans. They need to be able to facilitate teaching plans. They need to be able, you kind of get where I'm going here, certain tasks that need to be done. Worker-oriented has more, again, to do with that particular behavior. So yes, you can have someone that develops a particular lesson plan, but they need to be creative. They need to be engaging. They need to be conflict management skills, stress management skills, those two types of things. Ideally, it really depends upon the job, but you want to have a nice mixture of task-oriented and worker-oriented in terms of being efficient and successful in terms of that job. Number three, the authors argue that many aspects of performance are dynamic. So what did the book mean by this? So there's many different definitions I took from you guys. Again, really looking for your feedback on what you thought dynamic meant or performance in terms of dynamic. The general consensus of the entire class was that our performance is dynamic, meaning it tends to change over time for multiple different reasons. It can be positive or it could be negative. So one example is your performance in terms of the first few months of a job may be great, you may be amazing, and then you kind of settle in, and maybe you become a little too comfortable, and your performance tends to go down. Or maybe you simply just aren't challenged anymore. So that'd be kind of a negative way. Maybe a positive is looking at our performance, our dynamic performance, in terms of how it changes over time based upon other variables, in terms of, like, we look at college students. So one of the things that I often challenge my students on is this idea of intelligence, multiple intelligence. So should we, in terms of our employees, be looking at or gauging like performance appraisals in terms of how they learn based upon different types of intelligences? So, like college students, should I only be gauging their intelligence on multiple choice exams? Should I be gauging their intelligence only on short answer exams? Should I? Well, ideally, the best way to probably do it is to have a nice variety in terms of that, so that we can best gauge that dynamic performance, that they're given multiple opportunities to show their overall growth, so to speak. Interviews, the most popular selection devices out there. Really two major categories, unstructured and structured. So nobody really had an issue in terms of telling me what structured and unstructured was. Obviously, a structured interview, say you've got 5 people that are going to be doing the interview. Everybody has their set questions. They know what they're going to ask, and there really isn't much room to go outside of that. Unstructured tends to be a little more free flowing. So one of the pros, one of the cons to really each. Unstructured, what's nice about it is you can really dive into a person. Follow-up questions tend to be a common occurrence. The cons with unstructured is that you may not get to everything that you want to get to in terms of that, because you're allowing this unstructured environment, so to speak, to kind of go by the seat of your pants, for less of a better term, in terms of the overall interview. Structured interviews, one of the pros to that obviously is that you have a set amount of time, a set amount of questions. You can get to everything that you want. The problem with structured is kind of the obvious. Follow-up questions may not necessarily be encouraged, and you may not get a really good sense of who that particular candidate is. Cognitive dissonance, number 5. What is cognitive dissonance, and how could you really minimize or eliminate it? So cognitive dissonance, in my short to the point definition, is really a conflict in terms of thinking, in terms of rationality, and so forth. I'll give you a great example of that. So somebody who smokes, okay, may be demonstrating cognitive dissonance. So what I mean by that is they know smoking is bad for them. They know it causes cancer. They know they shouldn't be doing it. But through cognitive dissonance, they rationalize or minimize those facts in terms of it. For example, someone that constantly comes in late to work knows they come in late, knows they shouldn't be doing it, but they rationalize it. In terms of it, they minimize that particular behavior. So how do we minimize that? Well, a great way to do that is simply through documentation. And a great way to do that is through performance appraisals. So having exact dates, times, situations, again, documentation, a nice performance appraisal to not conflict, but confront that particular individual and put that cognitive dissonance right out in front. Have them really identify and address that with you in terms of how to go about minimizing it and understanding how it's actually a problem to that particular organization. So in terms of your overall exams, as I mentioned to you guys, if you've got questions in terms of your exams, just shoot me an email. I'll be more than happy to kind of pinpoint some of the mistakes and areas in which you can improve on. If that email doesn't necessarily work, I can obviously meet with you remotely. Very common questions or mistakes, I'm sorry, that people actually made was, again, do not assume the reader knows what you're talking about. Okay, whether it's this class or any other class, make sure that you give a very good in-depth explanation of what you were talking about. In addition to that, give examples. Even if the professor doesn't ask for them, give examples. Why? One, it will demonstrate further knowledge of that particular material. And two, it will help structure your answer. So you really want to give examples, give very clear definitions, make sure you utilize the course materials, identify things specifically from the course materials, and you should be good. Another very common mistake that people will make sure you proofread. So go back, reread your answer, and ask yourself, does that make sense, what I'm saying? Really do not write like you talk. Okay. You want to make sure, I'm not grading you on your grammar, but you want to make sure that the person reading your answer doesn't have to struggle in terms of that. Overall, I was very, very pleased with the exam. You have another exam coming up, you have a written assignment coming up, and I believe you have another discussion question or two. So if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me an email. Other than that, I wish you guys the best of luck moving forward, and I'll talk to you soon. All right, thanks, guys.